Good morning, my name's Philippa Oldham, Stakeholder Engagement Director at the Advanced Propulsion Centre, and this morning I'm joined by two colleagues, Gloria Esposito, who's Head of Projects at the Low Carbon Vehicles Partnership, and Dr Penny Atkins, who's Principal Research Fellow at the University of Brighton, and also the lead of the Advanced Propulsion Centre Thermal Propulsion Systems Thermal Efficiency Spoke. We're here to talk to you about a recently published report around the Transport Energy Network and tell you more about that network and what the opportunities are that we found within it. In 2019, transport accounted for 28% of all greenhouse gas emissions, which is the largest of all the sectors. This meant that we needed to look at how we could decarbonise this sector, as the government had committed to delivering on a net zero ambition. There's been a recent focus around passenger car and a lot of focus around the electrification. However, for the other transport modes, there are significant challenges in electrifying these. Therefore, alternative methods are needed to decarbonise these sectors, both in the short, medium and long term. We therefore formed this Transport Energy Network to look at that. The Transport Energy Network brought together a number of different organisations. In fact, over a course of workshops that we ran in 2019, we had over 152 attendees and 110 organisations involved for up and down the supply chain, from people who are manufacturing the fuels right through to the automotive manufacturers themselves. And we included the other sectors such as aviation, maritime and rail. So it was a real breadth of diversity across the different sectors.
So we collated workshop outputs to develop roadmaps for hard to decarbonise sectors of on and off highway heavy duty vehicles and marine. Before I talk about the roadmap, I'll explain the notation that I've used. So for a product that's in development, the pale green chevrons indicate the technology at pilot or demonstration stage. As the product moves into low volume within the market, the chevrons become dark green. A solid bar indicates the technology within the mass market. As the technology declines within the market, the chevrons become pale green. So this roadmap shows the technology development that the workshop stakeholders expected for heavy-duty on-road vehicles. Because of the workshop recognised the difference in technology adoption between the high-energy sectors, so for example, large, long-range freight applications and lower energy sectors of urban vehicles and bus. So within the larger heavy-duty applications, workshop participants recognised a shift from the predominantly ICE diesel-fuelled situation that we currently see to sustainable fuels with a variety of powertrains. So for example, electric vehicle, fuel cells and ICE with sustainable fuels. There's a relatively long lead time involved with this transition. So for example, for hydrogen, time is required to ramp up production of sustainable hydrogen and also develop fuel cell powertrains to give the durability and commercial performance that this sector requires. Catenary charging may provide an opportunity for electric vehicles within this sector with development of vehicle pantograph systems and the overhead charging infrastructure that's needed. Within the lower energy sectors of urban vehicles and bus, battery electric vehicles are already in the market. Hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles may also provide a good option with pilot fleets running within cities in the UK at the moment. So, based on these roadmaps, we developed estimations of the energy use in 2050 compared to use in 2020. So in 2020, the largest single fuel in use is diesel, in use across passenger car, heavy duty and marine sectors, followed by kerosene in aviation, gasoline in passenger car and HFO in marine. In 2050, we need to shift towards sustainable fuels to meet our net zero commitments. The estimates showed the largest single fuel in use in 2050 is sustainable kerosene within the aviation sector, followed by renewable electricity across passenger car and some parts of the heavy-duty truck and marine sectors. Sustainable hydrogen is predicted to be in use in heavy-duty truck and marine sectors alongside sustainable diesel. This analysis showed that although we see a big shift towards electrification in 2050, more than 75% of our transport energy could be provided by sustainable liquid and gaseous fuels. This means that it's really important to develop the technology and ramp up the production to produce these volumes of energy.
Vehicle life cycle analysis was identified by stakeholders as really important when taking into account different technology and fuel pathways. The diagram illustrates the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions analysis for a 7-ton urban truck. The vehicle has a 10-year lifetime and is operated in the UK. We can clearly see the benefit of low-carbon sustainable fuels used in incumbent ICE vehicles. They perform very well on a life cycle basis compared to zero-emission tailpipe technologies such as battery electric vehicle. Taking into account the future, the proportion of greenhouse gas emissions will change over the vehicle life cycle. So by 2030, we'll see an increasing electrification of the grid. And from a battery electric vehicle perspective, we'll see the proportions of life cycle emissions shifting from the in-use phase to vehicle production. And what that means is that we need to pay closer attention to the embodied emissions associated with both vehicle and component production. Now, alongside life cycle analysis, we also need to take into account the well-to-wheel energy efficiency of different low-carbon fuels. Now, from a well-to-tank carbon intensity, some low-carbon fuels can be very low carbon. But when it comes to the energy required both in terms of production and distribution, they can be thermodynamically inefficient. So therefore, whilst life cycle analysis is a very important tool in looking at greenhouse gas emissions, we also need to take into account a whole energy systems approach to understanding future resource implications, especially with regards to renewable electricity. The 10 network stakeholders identified over 20 enablers to enable the transition to a net zero transport future. One of the most important enablers was seen as strong and stable and long-term government policy, especially with regards to encouraging both the supply and demand of low-carbon sustainable fuels and vehicle propulsion technologies. Now, some examples of some of the enablers in this area included, for example, carbon tax. This was seen as very much of a global intervention, but it was seen as having a critically important role in shifting away from fossil fuel use and encouraging both the supply and adoption of low-carbon products. From a domestic point of view, fuel duty was seen as being a very powerful intervention to really encourage the move away from fossil fuels through pricing diesel and petrol at a higher price than, say, low-carbon fuels as well. Subsidies and grants, both to develop and commercialise sustainable low-carbon fuels, and supply chains for vehicle components was also seen as very important enablers.
So within the technology and infrastructure themes, fuels and powertrains were extremely important. However, network participants also recognised a range of other technology enablers, such as on-vehicle energy storage, like batteries and hydrogen tanks. To enable the large increase in electrification that we envisage, large increases in the generation of renewable electricity will be needed alongside grid balancing improvements such as smart charging and potentially the use of fuels like hydrogen for long-term energy storage.
So Penny and Gloria have touched on 3 of the enabling areas, but the final area is around the consumer uptake. And essentially, whilst we can have the right policy in place and potentially the right technology and infrastructure, ultimately it's down to the consumers to adopt those technologies. And actually some of the barrier points around that can having access to that infrastructure and feeling confidence in the technology. So making sure that it's the right price point for them is one thing. Currently, one of the challenges with the uptake of new technologies is that they can be more expensive. So really looking at the total cost of ownership, which is very important to the logistic operators in terms of the impact that it has on their businesses.
The Transport Energy Network report makes a range of recommendations. For powertrains, there is considerable work needed to develop powertrains, recognising that a range of different technologies will be needed to decarbonise across all sectors. It's therefore important that support for R&D and adoption of these technologies is technology neutral, focusing on policy goals of net greenhouse gas emissions and zero air pollution.
The second recommendation was with regards to the scale-up and commercialisation of sustainable low-carbon fuels, and that included specifically advanced drop-in fuels, for example, biosynthetic fuels, electrofuels, that would be beneficial not only for the heavy-duty vehicle sector but also for aviation, as well as low-carbon hydrogen. A key recommendation was to update the Automotive Council's roadmaps so that they include low-carbon fuels, and also for government to have a clear strategy with regards to commercialising these very important supply chains. The third important issue which came up as a recommendation was that the transition to a net zero transport future really must take into account sustainability. As we've mentioned before, life cycle greenhouse gas emission analysis is critically important, but we need to look beyond global warming impacts and consider other environmental and social implications. The production of low-carbon fuels and vehicle components can give rise to unintended environmental and social consequences. So, for example, when looking at environmental consequences, the use of natural resources is particularly important, whether that be using land to cultivate energy crops for biofuels, mining for minerals such as cobalt or lithium to produce electric vehicle batteries or motors, using fossil fuels to manufacture energy required for manufacturing, and also, for example, using water to generate renewable hydrogen via electrolysis. So really focusing on the supply chain is very important in terms of sustainability. We need to ensure that both terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems are protected, that we take into account safeguarding air quality, that we look to encourage circularity and energy efficiency, and also efficiency with regards to resources as well. So in terms of recommendations, one of the key points was life cycle thinking and sustainability principles need to be taken into account when government is designing and shaping policy. And from an automotive perspective, looking at the design of vehicle components and manufacturing itself.
Final of the 4 recommendations from the stakeholder workshops was to create a shared vision. This is demonstrated by the collaboration that we've had and real engagement across the sectors and follow-on conversations that we've had post the workshops, but really looking at a joined-up strategy from the government in terms of how they can work with those stakeholders to really develop the right solutions that are needed, and for industry to work together to look at where those innovations need to occur and where actually investment in research and development crosses those sectorial boundaries to help the development of the technology in particular areas. By working together, we can aggregate the demand and therefore improve and accelerate the technologies to market. We hope you've enjoyed our presentations today. It provides a short summary of the findings and the recommendations from the working groups that we had over the last year. More detail is available in the report, which is now available to download with the URL available on the screen. This is just the start of this process and really just setting the baseline of some of the challenges and opportunities that we have within the UK to really work together to help decarbonise the transport sector. So please sign up and get engaged with us on the APC website to join the next round of workshops. We hope these will be running in December, probably more likely to be virtual, but please sign up because we want to engage with as many people as we can because we really need this shared vision to go forward. So finally, I'd like to thank Gloria and Penny for taking part in this today, and we're now available to take any other questions that you may have about the report. Thank you.